Hey there, gang. Patrick King here, and I want to thank you for tuning in for episode number 37 of Talking About Horses. Today, I'm pleased to be joined once again by my friend Wendy Murdoch. Wendy's an international coach, clinician, and author, and she's definitely no stranger to this podcast. Wendy's joined me for 3 previous episodes in the last 2 years, and this makes it episode number 4. Wendy, thank you so much for joining us once again on Talking About Horses.
Such a good time. So
we totally do. We totally do. And I was looking through all of the podcasts that we've done in the past, and we've talked about, my gosh, everything, I think.
not everything. Otherwise, we'd have nothing to talk about tonight.
Oh, I don't know. I think we always have things to talk about.
Yep.
Oh, goodness.
I'm going to go out here on Facebook and let people. Do you have a link that I can post to tell people we're up live?
Goodness, you know what? It's live on my Facebook page. So if you were to jump onto that, just make sure you don't have your audio on. But if you were to jump onto that, you should be able to get a link for that.
Okay, and I'll just send everybody a note telling them that we're live. Dr. King Horsemanship, right?
Yes.
Cool.
Cool. Awesome. So for the people who might be listening that don't necessarily yet know who you are, which I imagine is probably a small segment of our audience at this point, but for those folks that don't know who you are, if you were stuck in an elevator with them and you needed to give an introduction, who is Wendy Murdoch?
Let's see, that's an elevator speech. I teach horseback riding to people all around the world, and what I tell people is that gravity is not discipline specific. So I work with riders of all levels in all disciplines because gravity is the law and you can't escape it. And horses are subject to gravity too, so that's just as important for them. And I work with both horse and rider to help them be in that balance within gravity so that they can achieve harmony.
I like it. That's pretty good.
Yeah, that was like off the cuff. So
well, that sounded really good. We can go through and write that down. We can put that on a business card or something for you, because that
awesome.
I think that was pretty good.
I like your Christmas tree in the background there, by the way.
Oh, you like that? Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Awesome. So why don't we touch a little bit more on that, actually, the gravity. And you said that riders and horses are both subject, of course, as we know, to gravity, and that you help them to achieve balance and harmony. How does that work?
So gravity, the problem with gravity is that we're born in gravity, we live in it, and we die in it. And so it's so insidious to our being. I mean, we wouldn't have a skeleton, we wouldn't have muscles to move us around if it wasn't for the type of gravity that we're living in, that we don't even consider it. But we do, in that the nervous system is totally aware of when we might be falling. So it sends off the alarm systems that we're out of balance or we're falling by making us feel anxious and afraid or nervous. And so what we fail to go is, oh, that's my warning system telling me I'm out of balance. Instead, that's my warning system, I'm afraid, I don't want to ride my horse. And so when we start to realize that it's a warning system, it's there to tell us something, and then we have to understand, well, what's the message? The message is that the nervous system, the brain, is experiencing an instability in some way. And so when I work with riders, the first thing I do is show them that their premise is that they're secure in the saddle, and that they're not. And I do that by very simply, the first time I work with a rider, I ask permission to put my hands on, I stick my hands on their belly and on their back, and I have them take a breath. And I can feel from that breath whether or not when I push, they're going to be staying in the saddle and unified with their horse, which is what I think of as unity, is that you are with your horse, or they're going to move over the horse. And if they move over the horse, then that means they're going to knock that horse off balance. Once you do that, now the horse's nervous system kicks in and goes, I'm falling, and I need to do something to save myself. And this is not on a thought level. This is a total reactionary level. The horse is going to stick out a foot, raise its head and neck, brace, rush, or stop. And I can never say what the horse is going to do. I just know something's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So the minute we're insecure, we're out of balance or not secure in the saddle, we knock that horse off balance. That horse has to react to us. It can be a snowball effect. And when we're looking at performance, every tiny little imbalance affects performance. That to reach the highest level of whatever your discipline, being as solid and secure in the saddle, meaning stable and predictable for the horse, and then using simple, clear aids, because now you're no longer having to knock the horse off balance, allows him to be immediately efficient and perform to his best. It's just like any athlete at any sport. If we look at golf, tennis, skiing, baseball, football, those athletes work toward being in big fit and in good balance, so and also coordinated to do their sport. Well, if we're braced, if we're stiff, if we don't know where our hip joints are, then we can't use our body as efficiently as we need to. And again, if I push on that person, I'll feel that. And then the first thing I do is show them, hey, look, there is this other place. And sometimes it's less than 1/4 of an inch away, literally. And I just make this tiny little shift, and I push on them again, and they're solid as a rock, and I move the horse. And so the nervous system acknowledges, wow, oh wait, that's different, because we're designed to sense the differences. And then it's a question of how do I apply that in everything I do so that I can use my body as efficiently as possible and have my aids as clear as possible so that my horse can do the job as easily as possible.
And it's just that easy, right?
Yeah.
So you talked about riders being like athletes, right? Which makes perfect sense. Being coordinated, being fit, being skilled, using their body efficiently. What about the braces that we have in our bodies? What about, okay, my right hip is stiffer than my left hip, or my left shoulder has this want to drop all the time, or, you know, even something as basic as I get nervous and I hold my breath. How do you take riders apart? And I'm asking this basically kind of being in line, having seen you do this several times. Tell us about how you break the rider apart so that you can help them to be more secure.
So one of the things that I do very frequently is I dispel the myth. One of the key myths that people have is heels down at all costs. So what's happened with that is that we've lost function or style, meaning that we're now judging somebody's correct position not by how well their body moves efficiently with the horse, but by whether or not their heel is determined to be deep enough by an objective, non-objective observer, actually, as opposed to how is this affecting the horse. So all buildings are built from the ground up. The ground of the rider is the pelvis and the feet. In other words, those are the places in contact with something. And I don't worry about anything above the waist until I get the bottom half of the body organized, because so much of what we see up above or in the contact is a result of what's happening in the feet and the legs. What I mean by that is teach people where their hip joints are. I spend a lot of time teaching anatomy. Most people don't know their own body. That's like 95% of my students.
Right.
So we're culturally taught that your hip is the top of your pelvis where your belt sits, but that is not a joint. And if we need to learn where our actual hip joints are, because the joints are where movement occurs. If we brace our foot against the stirrup and block the hip, knee, and ankle, then those joints can't move with the horse. We cause the horse to break. However, we're back to this idea that the first lesson people are taught is heels down, and we've misinterpreted or lost the interpretation of that, meaning weight in the heel as opposed to pressure. So when we apply pressure to the stirrup, Newton's, we're right back to physics, Newton's third law, for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction, which means the harder you brace on the stirrup, the harder the stirrup braces back on you.
Yes.
that. So now your joints are going to become stiff and very many times painful, especially the knees, because you have all this pressure going to the stirrup, and that pressure is coming back up your leg, and you have to figure out how to absorb that somehow. And people try to do that in their lower back, which is not designed to absorb that type of movement.
Mm-hmm.
The hip, knee, and ankle are the primary shock absorbers for the joint designed to absorb the movement of the horse. So when we eliminate them by breaking on the stirrup, now we start to try and absorb it in our back. We become a pivot because we now have our long lever, the leg, and you pivot over the leg, and then you wind up pulling on the horse's mouth, and he gets upset. So just understanding that the hip joint is where the leg meets the body, and feeling where that joint is critical, not just to having a solid seat, but to all contact to the horse's mouth. If your hips have any kind of tension, that is transmitted through your seat and through your reins if you have a bridle. And if you don't have a bridle, like if you're riding bridleless, it's still going to go into the horse and affect the contact or the way the horse uses his body, because that restriction is not just in your body. You have to remember physics again. The harder you push on the stirrup, the harder the stirrup pushes back on you. Mm-hmm. But the attachment point of the stirrup leather is at the stirrup bar. So when you brace against the stirrup itself, not only does it make you rigid, but it puts a lot of pressure behind the horse's shoulder blade where the stirrup bar is attached to the saddle. All saddles, that's more forward, more toward the front of the saddle. It's not in the middle. So we are automatically putting more pressure in behind the horse's shoulder and driving the horse's back down, when, of course, we want the horse's back to come up so he can come off the forehand.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So this very early on idea of heels down by bracing sets both the horse and the rider up to fail, because that bracing restricts the joints that are most needed, causes the horse to go on the forehand, and then we're supposed to solve that in some way without actually reducing the pressure on the stirrup. And, you know, it's the thing that I teach besides, you know, the first two things I teach is here's the alignment of your pelvis and lower back, here's where your hip joint is, and now we have to have 3 functional joints in the leg. And when we achieve that, then, you know, then I can go up to the upper body, look at shoulder, look at rein, look at all that stuff. But until I solve the base, there's no point.
Sure, because everything else would just be resisting or restricting because of the base being off, right? Compensating. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So all this trouble because of, not all of it because of, but a lot of this trouble basically because of that first introductory lesson of heels down. Where does that come into play? Where does that come from? Why heels down? Why is that the first lesson that everybody learns?
So the purpose or the intention behind the action is to have weight in the heel, but not pressure. So what's the difference between weight and pressure? Pick any object up that's inanimate. And you just lift it, or you put it on a scale, and that's weight. It's the mass of the object times gravity, because everything is subject to gravity on the earth.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Pressure is when you apply a force. So a good example is you take a garden hose and you close off the nozzle a little bit, and you have a high pressure, and you can shoot the stream really, really far because of the increased pressure in the hose. Poke a bunch of holes in the hose, no pressure coming out the other end, so you've reduced the pressure dramatically. People have no idea how strong their legs really are, and especially in relation to a stirrup. Because, you know, when did you learn to push against the floor to stand up? When you were about 7 months old.
Right, yeah, pretty early in life.
Right, and if you don't learn to push against the floor to stand, you will not stand. It's not going to happen. You must learn to push against it. So if you watch little babies, they go from crawling and they pull themselves up on an object with their hands, right? And then they start pushing down with their hands on that object and pushing down on the floor with their feet, and they bounce up and down a whole bunch of times.
Yes.
So they're learning how to push against the floor in order to stand. So we need that. That's really, really important.
Mm-hmm.
when we get in the saddle, first of all, there's been nothing to tell us how much we need to push against the floor, because the floor doesn't care. The earth doesn't care. So we don't realize how much force we exert, the calf muscle being like the strongest muscle in the body, and the lever of the calcaneus, your heel bone, your huge Achilles tendon, and your calf muscle, super strong. So that's, you know, what we're using. We're using the extensor muscles on the front of the leg. We're straightening the knee, and we're bracing the heel down against the stirrup to, quote unquote, get our heels down. But heels down is actually supposed to be weight in the heel without pressure, as opposed to pressure to get the heel down. And when we have simply weight in the heel, the ankle becomes functional as a passive, what I call treadle, is able to absorb and sink to absorb the horse's motion. But the minute we fix the heel in a downward position, we've taken that absorbing factor away. So heels down. When I was a kid, I grew up in the 70s in Fairfield County, Connecticut. You know, my idols were Bill Steinkraus, Ronnie Much, Victor Hugo Vidal, George Morris, Kathy Kusner, who's the guy who wrote Wiley Trout. I mean, these were all the people that I saw every summer. They came to Oxford Town Club Horse Show, and my teacher, Kathy Campbell, was from that era of 50s and 60s and 70s. And we were taught the same positions that Bert Denemeth taught our U.S. jumping team for 25 years, when no one could beat us. If you go to Equestrians back in the day on Facebook and you look at the photos, I can tell you what decade the photo is from. Like, if it's anything after the 70s, it's like there was a schism, and suddenly we lost a functional position and wound up with a style. We wound up with the braced lower leg, the toe turned out, hollow back, the crest release, the climbing up the neck, the jumping up at the horses. That all happened in the 80s, and I'm old enough to know.
So why and how did that happen?
Well, we went from military training because Bert Denemeth was cavalry, Hungarian cavalry, and Jack Legoff was cavalry, and Gordon Wright, I'm pretty sure he was cavalry, and Dad was cavalry. Who's the event rider? He's still teaching. Anyway, so we had all this cavalry influence prior to that.
Okay.
And then we lost that cavalry influence with that next generation of teachers, and we wound up with a style as opposed to a function. So in the cavalry, you have to be able to ride 100 miles with 3 inches between your girth and the horse. You had to be able to go over all terrain. You did grids without reins, you know, multiple grids. You did all these exercises on the horse. And it was also geared towards young, strong men. And so, like, riding without stirrups, that was designed to beat men up enough, because they're so strong, to let go of their gripping muscles and ride in balance. Okay. You had to fatigue them. They had to ride long enough to fatigue to stop gripping.
Gotcha.
Right? Then we take those same types of teaching and we move into the 80s, where we've lost the military influence, we've lost the understanding of dysfunction. The saddles changed and became these, we used to call them pancake saddles, the predonations, the blue ribbons, the Hermé, the super flat saddles. And the type of person riding also shifted to become more of the lean, the tall, thin woman who tends to be more lax in the ligament. Like, I was not a hunter type. You know, in the 80s when I was showing, it's like I didn't have a very body type. I'm short, and I have
sure.
I'm not that long anymore. So it was selected for a type, and we lost the understanding of function because it wasn't being taught. And we also, I think, it became actually, I can remember as a kid, it became more about the color of your lining of your coat and who you rode with than how you rode.
And funny how that doesn't seem to have changed a whole lot.
Not in the past 40, 80, yeah, And so sadly, we lost the function. And that's why, we don't, people are getting stuck at 18 inches instead of being able, when I was a kid, 3 foot, 3'6", those were your hunter classes, right? Your first year green, your second year green, and then I think it was 4 foot for your full-on hunters, your appointment classes. And outside courses with stone wall, real stone wall.
Right.
That sort of thing. And it shifted and it downgraded because, quite frankly, people weren't riding in the same way to be able to do those courses. And it got stuck inside arenas. We lacked outside courses. There was this devolution of function. And sadly. So, but, the idea feels that it's not just in the hunter world. I mean, I just did that jumping course with Callie, and so it's on my mind to think more about jumping right now. But it's not just in the jumping world. It's in all the disciplines that we don't have the understanding of what the intention was and the function is with, why do we give this direction? Why are you being told to do this thing? Well, if you ask them, a lot of people can't really give you a functional answer. It's just that that's supposed to make you secure. And I can't tell you how many people come to me and go, I'm trying like crazy and I'm still insecure. And it's because they're bracing.
Right.
They're older women. They don't have the flexibility. But the question really comes back to, well, how deep does your heel need to be? As opposed to get your heel down as far as you can. And the depth of heel is a function of the length of the stirrup, the length of your foot, so a longer foot, because we're looking at the ankle as the fulcrum, will be able to have a deeper heel than a shorter foot. Damage to your ankles, you've had damage to your ankles, and your overall laxity of ligaments. In other words, if your ligaments are not lax, your heel is not going to go as deep as someone who does have laxity. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's better. Because I just had a student that came up for filming the course, and she's one of those lean body type, like very, very flexible. And the problem there is she lacks stability.
Yeah, sure. Right.
So we're constantly dancing on my gravestone. They're going to put where's the middle. Okay, that's right. We're constantly dancing around we go to the extremes, right? Heels down at all costs. I'm not saying I want your heel up, but in the middle, we have to look at your body, what your job is, or what kind of discipline you're doing with your horse, what you're riding, and the key is: are you secure in the saddle? Yes or no? And can your joints absorb the motion of your horse? Yes or no? And if you just simply jam your heel down, it's not necessarily going to give you the thing you want. But if that's the only information you've been given, you keep trying to do what they tell you, right?
Right, sure.
The instructor's supposed to know what they're doing. They're supposed to be able to help you find that security. And yet, if that's the only information you're given, it's not going to get you what you want. Sadly.
Right.
Right. And, I talk about this quite often. And it's, sadly, it's the state of my industry. And one of my hopes is that by, being this voice that just keeps saying where's the middle and what's the function, that we can come back from some of these extremes of bracing and stiffening and, putting horses on the forehand and people getting injured. And we come back and go, well, wait a second, what is it we're doing here? Because horse riding is the only sport where you're dealing with another brain. And
right.
At least, okay, dog sledding, yes, you're dealing with many brains. But, like in terms of, you think of golf, tennis, skiing, hiking, you're dealing with the earth. You in relation to the earth, in relation to whatever, whether it's a ball or, a racket or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
In riding, our feet are not on the ground. And so, and the horse has a brain. And so if you put yourself in an odd position, the majority of horses are going to adapt, like compensate for that. And then they're going to, it's like wearing an old pair of shoes. If you've ever gotten on somebody else's horse, I'll never forget getting on the supposed Grand Prix horse, and it felt like I got into somebody's warped slippers, like really bad.
Oh, geez.
I don't understand how the horse could do what he did.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, but he learned, and because he has a brain, he understood what she wanted.
Yeah.
And so he could do these things.
Right.
So that's the difference is with riding, we have good feedback if we understand what's being fed back to us. And if we're willing to experiment to see if I do this, what happens? If I do this, what happens? And let the horse show me. But if I simply try to do what, and someone, standing on the ground is telling me to do, and I try my hardest to do what they're telling me, and I don't get the result, there's something missing in that information that you're getting that's not actually giving you what you want. Does that make sense?
It does. So the answer is just more leg, right?
Yeah. And what does that mean? Should I grow a third one?
Right. At some point, you're going to run out of leg. I always make the joke that to be a riding instructor, all you need is 4 little commands. Heels down, hands down, eyes up, more leg.
Yeah.
And then you can go print a business card if you can recite those 4 lines.
Which, sadly, in this country, we have no qualifications for the term riding instructor.
Right.
I mean, there are some organizations, but there's no national standard for what is a riding instructor.
Right.
In other countries where I go, in Finland, they have 4 different categories of riding instructors. And you have to go through training. They have 2 full-time equine colleges. And you go through training, and then you can say that you're one of these 4 types of instructors based on the training they've had. You can't just put out a little sign that says riding instructor. But here, sadly, we don't have a uniform definition of a good position. We don't. But gravity would dictate that we should.
Right? Sure.
And that's the thing.
Well, that goes back to form to function, right? So there shouldn't. How could there be so much room, so much variance in what somebody calls a good position?
Right. And how can it be that different discipline to discipline? Because we're still dealing with gravity,
right,
and a horse,
right,
and a skeleton, and muscles, and a nervous system. We haven't changed that. And the tack, the only thing about the tack is some tack lets you be in a better position than other tack. So the tack can actually be a negative to achieving a good position.
Right.
It can be a positive, but in many cases it's a negative. So you're riding around intact. I've had people literally come up to me and say, you spend more of your time teaching people to ride around their tack than anything else. Because the tack is made for the average person. Or people are told this is good for you for these reasons, but they're not looking at it from the perspective that I look at it. Okay, here's gravity. This is the alignment. This is going to make it the least stress on your body. This is going to make it the least stress on your horse's body. I mean, theoretically, there should only be one basic riding position. And when I say that, I mean, when you're doing extreme sports, there are variations in the overall balance, but the variations are very slight relative to the line of gravity and the basic position.
Sure.
So when someone when someone has an extreme idea, my question is, why are they telling you that? And what is it they're compensating for? And what can we eliminate to make this all easier so you don't have to do that? Like leaning, tilting. I think in the reining world is probably where I see things in terms of lack of understanding of physics. quite egregious
Mm-hmm.
because they talk about opening the door, and so they stick a leg out to open the door,
Right.
but they don't realize
right.
that when you do that, 90% of the time or more, no, 99, the rider throws the weight to the opposite side, which puts the pressure against the withers on the side where the horse, they're asking the horse to move into. In other words, if I open the door on the right, with my right leg out, I've shifted my weight of the left back leg, but I've put the saddle pressure on the right side of the wither, which blocks the horse from being able to freely move his leg because the withers are now being shifted left and loading the left front leg down. So now he can't move it because that's gotten stuck to the ground.
Right.
Instead of, if you think of any other sport, if you want to make a fast turn, you don't throw your weight to the opposite side to turn. You just turn from the middle. So the horses are having to actually go the opposite direction of what the rider wants before it can go where they want. And the question is, what actually makes them go where they want? And is it the spur on the outside shoulder?
Right. Sure.
So, and it's really interesting because when I teach, I often will get spouses that have nothing to do with horses, but they'll come up to me and go, I totally understood what you said. And that's
sure. Absolutely.
Because it's within the line of the known world.
Right. Yep. And I've always found it similar in that way. It seems that when you break it down into the actual mechanics of what's taking place, it should be fairly obvious what needs to take place.
Right. Instead of, some people want to create this mystique and this mystery, and you have to study for 1,000,000 years before you'll ever get the secret, and you may not. And
right.
If it's that elusive, either you're a really bad teacher, or you're not understanding what this is. Now, I'm not saying it's easy. Don't ever take me wrong to think it's easy. In fact, that's the title of my book, which just came back out after 10 years. It's back in print. Simplify Your Riding.
Yes.
I call it simple, but that doesn't mean it's easy.
Right. Simple, but not simplistic.
Correct. Because one of the hardest things to do is to understand and experience your own body.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like, I had surgery in January. I had a very bad accident in 1984 when a horse rolled over me and punched my femur through the socket. You know that story.
Mm-hmm.
And in January, I had finally developed enough of a bone spur on the greater trochanter that I went to the doctor. He's like, well, it was in December. He said, okay, we're going to do surgery. And when he got in there, he found out that gluteus medius, the middle gluteal muscle, which attaches to the greater trochanter, was 3/4 severed. In other words, it was only hanging on by 25% of the tendon. And if that had severed, it would have rolled up like, a shade. So I was really lucky.
Oh, yeah.
But afterward, and I'm not 100% sound, but the weirdest thing was I lost connection to my leg. Like I was like, okay, I know this is my leg, but I would go to my pelvic practitioner, and she'd work with me, and I was like, she'd have to like reconnect it back to my brain, and reconnect it back to my brain, because she says essentially surgery is like being stabbed. Which when she said that to me, I was like, okay, I get that.
Yeah.
But pain, and I don't experience pain like owl pain. What I found out in the hospital is when I have pain, I get foggy. I just get foggy, and it's like, yeah. So they finally realized they had to give me pain meds in the hospital when I started feeling foggy, because it was like, do you have pain? I don't know. I probably because I've had so much pain in my life. I just handle it differently. But, like my whole leg it would not like function. Like I rode one day in the spring, and my leg was fabulous, and I was like so excited. And I got on my horse the next day, and my leg didn't do anything.
Oh, wow.
I was like, oh, you're not working today. Okay, well, I better get off now.
My goodness.
so to know our own body, it's like, it was a really good experience because, it helps me go back to relating to my students once again. It's like, we live in it all the time. It's like gravity. We live in our body all the time. But sometimes we have no awareness of certain parts or certain functions of how we use it. And this is a blessing and a curse. So your really, really good riders, if you ask them what they do, they basically can't tell you.
Right, they ride.
Can't tell you how they use their feet. They tell you what they're observing. Hands and feet, I use my lower leg here, or I do this, or I touch with my brain there. Because that's where we have a lot of brain awareness, like the mapping in our brain, a lot more area mapped to hands and feet, lips and eyes, and ears. But the seat, the pelvis, the thighs, the lower back, we don't have nearly as much mapping. So they're not even consciously aware of that they've done anything or not done anything, as the case may be, with their seat. Like they haven't knocked the horse off balance. They haven't pushed him over. They haven't dropped off one side. So when they go to try to tell somebody what they're doing, they can only speak to the things that they're consciously aware of. They can't speak to the things that they don't realize they do.
Right. A whole different level of self-awareness.
Yeah. So, that's the thing is, it's kind of one of the interesting things about riding is that for the rest of us, it's constantly this exploration of how I function and then how that function relates to my horse. And when we start to look at it that way, as opposed to I have to get this right, I've got to do this because I've been told that's what's going to work, is when we start to be a little more permission to be exploring and to try different things and to experiment and not get so hung up that I'm going to wreck my horse, quote unquote.
Oh, yeah.
Then we can start to see these interrelationships. And when I do this, my horse does, X, Y, and Z. Obviously, not to be done on a young horse, right?
Sure.
But taking the time to do quiet exploration and experimentation on your older horse, your trained horse, to start realizing how your body influences that horse to a degree that most people are totally unaware. And when we start to experience that, it starts to really change the whole system, and it becomes more of a dialogue than a demand.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and it's just starting to look at how does my body function? Where are my joints, especially hip joints? How does that relate to my horse? If I allow my joints to move in my hip, knee, and ankle, how does my horse respond? And the thing is, the thing I find about horses that's so amazing is that they're so I guess I'll poorly quote someone from this weekend who was watching me teach for 2 days, and she said the smallest changes in the rider made huge changes in the horses. Because I really didn't tell the riders what to do with the horse. I was telling the riders what to do with themselves. And this woman observed some of the most dramatic changes in the horses she'd seen in the clinic because the riders were in a position to be able to guide the horse instead of make the horse's job harder.
Sure. The horse was better able to do what it was they were asking because of the position they were in order to ask.
Right. And then the clarity shows up, right? And the ease shows up, and the elegance shows up. You know Kathleen Lindley Beckham, right? Yeah, that's where I was.
Okay.
We were at her place, and the first day was this gorgeous Georgia day. Beautiful, sunny skies. The next day, it pissed down rain about 6 inches.
Oh, no.
She had a covered arena that she had arranged. We were so grateful. It just poured and poured and poured and poured. But yeah, and I've been working with Kathleen now. She's been riding with me I want to say 3 years. I'm not quite sure. But you know that she had that stroke quite a long time ago, and it was starting to catch up with her. And so that's why she came out of Florida to start riding with me. And I mean, she's a very diligent person, and she really does her homework. But it's paying off. The difference is just huge, huge.
Good.
When I first met her, her left side was kind of like an alien being on a horse. And now, this time, I looked at her left leg, and I was like, it looks just like your right leg. It had the same quality as her right leg. I was blown away.
That's fantastic. That doesn't happen by accident, that's for sure.
No, and she's a really neat person, but she, like I said, she works at it.
Yeah.
And it does not come easy for her, unlike people who aren't dealing with those kind of things.
Right, right.
She's an awesome person.
Well, and so much of that, you know, we mentioned the self-awareness piece. I think so much of that comes down to that, and like you're saying with Kathleen, the intentional use of the body in particular ways.
Yeah.
And it's so easy for us to get stuck into habits, right? And patterns of mobility or immobility that we're not even aware of.
Right. And, you know, some of that is imposed by the instruction that we're given. Like, you know, when someone shows up for a lesson with me, what I know is they're there because they want to learn, and they're trying their best. And that's the thing, is they're going to try their best. And sometimes it's like they try too hard. And so that actually prevents them from riding well, because, you know, someone's told them, well, they got to do this. So they're really going to do this.
Right.
And then it's swung the pendulum too far in the opposite direction. So really it's about, you know, reducing the swing of the pendulum to a tiny little vacillation, not a swing that goes to the extremes, but really it's right around the middle. And there's always movement. You're never totally, you know, the stillness is an illusion, because you're moving and appear still.
Right.
You're on something that's moving. And it's how you achieve that appearance of stillness is by where you absorb emotion.
Right. And that reminds me so much of in the past, I've done some Tai Chi. A friend of mine is a Tai Chi master, and I love the line that always comes up, and he's the only one I've really done it with, so I don't know if everybody says it or if it's just his line, but he says, you know, there's movement in stillness and there's stillness in movement. And I think of that all the time, when, just like what you're talking about, you know, in order to appear still, there's a lot of little subtle movements that have to take place.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's where, you know, in riding, it's so much. When you can absorb the movement in the lower body, then the upper body glides, and it appears that you're right perfectly still, but everything underneath is absorbing that.
Yes.
And that's the key.
Right.
You know, the ground is moving up to you every stride, not push. You know, the minute you start to push it down, you lose the loft, you lose the suspension, you lose the elegance. And so it's being able to allow the horse to move up into your seat instead of pushing your horse down.
So it all comes back to not jamming your heels down.
Yeah, not jamming your heels down and not hollowing your back out. You know,
right.
Because so here's the interesting thing. Okay, take your hand and close it. You got to do this with me while I'm talking to you.
Okay. I'm going to do it so you can see it.
Right? So if you take your hand and you close it, the fingers come together to the palm of the hand, and that's flexion. Right? So when you flex the hand closes. When you extend the hand, the fingers go away. Right? They go further apart. Right? So if you flex your hand and then flex your wrist and flex your elbow, well, this is the direction all the joints go. Right? So the elbow comes into the body, the wrist flexes down, right? So now if you flex your foot, which way does your foot go?
The opposite.
So is that flexion or is that extension? Okay, so now follow along with me, because normally I do this with people watching.
Well, people are watching me right now, so.
Okay, good. So if you flex your hand, your fingers come in towards the palm of your hand, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you flex your toes curl into the sole of your foot.
Yes.
And if you flex your wrist, it drops down. And if you flex your ankle, your foot actually points down.
Points down, yes.
And your knee bent.
Yes. Even sitting here in the chair, I can feel the knee want to bend more.
Correct. So that's all flexion. Okay? So
Okay.
now extend your knee, and then extend your ankle and extend your toes. And which way does your foot go?
The foot comes up toward the shin.
Correct.
Okay.
That's extension. That's not flexion. Okay?
Yes.
And by sympathy, if you were sitting in the saddle or sitting up, when you extend your foot, you're going to extend your lower back, which means you're going to hollow your lower back.
Okay. Yes.
So in nervous, we talk about the nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
The nervous system knows the difference between flexion and extension because the flexor nerves come off the underside of the spine, and the extensor nerves come off the dorsal surface, the back of the spine.
Okay.
So when you go to do heels down, you're actually extending the ankle, and your knee extends, meaning it straightens, and now you have pushed against the stirrup and hollowed your lower back, which is close to the bio angle. Put your body forward, put your horse on the forehand.
Yes.
So this is where we get in trouble, is that people say heels down or toes up, and they're both the same in the nervous system book, because we're going to have to go into extension, because you can feel the extensor muscles is what they're called. If you put your hand on the front of your shin, when you lift the front of the foot, you're going to feel the extensor muscles shortening or contracting to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So when we go to push our heel down and we go into extension, our knee straightens, and now we're braced against the stirrup, and we've lost the most important joint for being able to be with the horse is the knee. After the hip, it's the knee. Because we straightened it, we blocked it, and as we push against the stirrup with the foot in extension and the knee straightening, we're going to push ourselves back in the saddle, or we're going to have to round or hollow our back.
Mm-hmm.
Because now you have to think about the leg bone is jamming up into the hip socket, and you're going to have to move the pelvis, move the hip socket in some way to accommodate the leg bone getting rammed up into the hip joint.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm.
You with me?
Yes.
So that's the thing is, what we're supposed to have is an absorbing ankle, an ankle that I talk about passively treadling, being able to move and sink down without any tension. And the minute we go into extension to lift the front of the foot or brace the heel down, we lose the passive nature of the ankle and the ability for it to absorb motion, and definitely jam up the knee and block that joint from being able to absorb motion. So now we're teetering over the top of our horse, trying to figure out how to stay with him, because we've created this huge long lever of our leg that's not able to absorb the movement. Okay?
Yeah.
Well, it's fun doing this without any picture.
Right. People are watching me on camera, sitting here thinking, and I think I've kicked the camera twice now, moving my legs under the table, and.
Well, and that's the thing, is because we've lost the function of heels down was to have weight in the heel to anchor the leg, but not pressure to brace.
Yeah.
And so the really, if you want to know whether or not somebody is bracing against their stirrup, the easiest thing to do is look at the leather. And if the leather is not hanging straight down, they have pushed the pendulum. They have braced against the stirrup and pushed it forward.
Mm-hmm.
So, because the leather's going to hang straight down when you take your foot out because of gravity.
Right.
So if it's pushed forward, we know that there is too much pressure against the stirrup that has swung the pendulum forward, the stirrup forward, and it's going to restrict the absorbing joint, and it's going to cause the rider to have to alter their pelvic position in some way, and then compensate with their upper body to get their head over their foot by leaning forward. So if you want to, when I look at a rider and I think, okay, is this heel down in a way that's absorbing, you can simply look at the direction of the heel. If the heel is going toward the horse's front foot, then they have braced against stirrup and they're not able to absorb the motion. If the heel is going toward the horse's back foot and the heel is sinking down, now you are in the correct place where your joints can work.
Gotcha.
Yep. So
that's a great visual too. Even though, you know, talking about it on the, you know, in a broadcast like this, I think that's a really easy visual for folks to pick up on.
Yeah, because if it's going to the front foot, you have pushed that foot forward, your foot forward, and everything is going to have to justify forward to get over your foot because your brain wants you to head over your foot.
Right.
If the heel is going toward the horse's back foot, then the lower leg is lengthening back and down. So if anybody's got a picture of a rider on a horse in front of them, any picture, if you draw a line from the hip off the knee to the ground and draw a second line from the back of the knee along the calf to the ground, it will form a triangle with the ground being the third line. That triangle is your base of support in relation to the ground. And if that triangle is correct, if your lines are correct, and it doesn't matter the stirrup length, but if it's correct, it's going to make a very nice, neat, big triangle on the ground. Obviously, the longer stirrup is going to have a smaller triangle, and the shorter stirrup will have a bigger one. But if you push your heel forward down, the heel is going to the horse's front foot, the line from the back of the knee to the back of the calf has now shifted forward, and the whole base has swung forward. So now you're going to not have as much stability. Because you don't have that deep, big triangle underneath you. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yes.
It does.
It's one of my favorite words to make everybody crazy. We're looking at the polygon of sustentation.
I'm going to write that one down. The polygon of what?
Of sustentation. This is where you realize I'm nerdy.
Oh yeah, I hadn't thought that before.
You haven't? So polygon is a figure, right?
Yes.
It's a 5, 6, 7, 8 sided octagon, hexagon. Those are all polygons. And sustentation is coming from a French word, which is basically, if you think of it, break it down a little bit, it's to sustain. Right? So it's the area over which you are sustained. And the larger the area over which you are sustained, the more stable you are.
Sure.
Right? You wouldn't take a basketball and put it on top of a tiny little ball and expect it to be able to stay up there very easily. Anything is going to knock it off. Right?
Right.
But if you put that basketball on top of a really big pyramid, it's going to be really secure. It'll stay up there. So this polygon of sustentation that's made from the line from the hip down the front of the thigh off the knee and the line from the back of the knee along the calf to the ground, those two lines are going to create a triangle, and the bigger that triangle, the more stable you will be. So if you think about somebody riding cross country and they're going to shorten up their stirrups, now thigh becomes more horizontal. That line is going to be even greater when it comes to the base of the triangle, right? As we close the angle of the rider's leg, those lines extend out now further, and the polygon of sustentation gets bigger. So you're more secure. Right.
Now, is there a point with that position where you can take that too far?
Jockeys take it as closed as possible, right? That's as short as you can go.
Okay.
As a flat racer. And if you look at the really good ones, their heel is not jammed down. Right. But their thigh is basically horizontal.
Right.
So they have that's why they have those stirrups that short, to make them as secure, as stable as possible. And then when we go the other way, longer, like for dressage, yes, you can get too long when there's not enough bend in the knee. Just like riding a bicycle with the feet too high.
Yes, okay.
Right? So that's where you can get it too straight, but you can't get it too closed in terms of stability.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and your knees, if you're doing it right, then your knees shouldn't hurt. Your quads might be screaming at you, but the knees should not hurt because we haven't put any pressure on them. It's when you brace on the stirrup we cause the pressure on the knees, and that's when the knees hurt.
Yes. Okay. Fantastic. I hope you don't mind, but we've got some questions that have been popping in as we go. I'm hoping I'm saying the name right. It looks like Morel from the Netherlands. She has a question. She says, I had a discussion with someone about the perfect seat, hypothetically, because nobody's perfect. Spoken about the ideal situation. Does the rider sit on his ischium or on the ischium and the pubic bone?
Oh, that's actually a function of your saddle. So, yeah, it's not necessarily a question of, because if the rider tries to force the sitting on the pubic and the saddle isn't sitting right, A, you're going to kill yourself. You'll be bloody and painful, literally.
Okay.
But B, so the seat bones, if you look at them, they're a continuum of bones from the pubic arch where the pelvis meets in the front, and then it curves down and it gets very wide, and then it curves back up, and the back part is actually the hip socket. Okay? So the hip socket, the pubic bone, and the ischial-tuberosity, the seat bone, form a triangle. If you look at the structure, the widest part of that is the ischial-tuberosity, the seat bone. It gets very broad. And as you get toward the pubis, the bone gets narrow, and as you get back toward the hip socket, it becomes the hip socket. Okay?
Okay.
So from a functional perspective, it would make the most sense that you would weight bear on the widest part of the sit bone, and that would align the hip socket over the seat bone. So if you round the lower back, the seat bone is going to move forward relative to the hip joint, hip socket. And if you hollow your back, the seat bone is going to move toward the rear relative to your hip joint, hip socket. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So you want the weight borne on the widest part of the sit bone, and when you do that, your hip socket and your seat bone basically are on a vertical line. Because the widest part is obviously the best for weight bearing, and that lets your weight of your head align over your pelvis.
Gotcha.
Now, when we put the saddle into this picture, if the twist or the rise, whichever you want to call it, but the front part going up into the pummel, if it matches the angle of your pubic bone, and everybody's pubic bone has a different width and has a different angle, if the saddle matches the width and angle of your pubic bone, you can have contact with the pubic bone and the two seat bones without any pain, and it's what I call kindness, right? It matches the contour of your body shape. But if, when your seat bones are straight down like that with the hip joint aligned over the seat bones, if you don't touch, trying to touch is going to cause a problem, because now you're going to have to tilt the pelvis forward down to put the pubic bone into the pommel of the saddle, into the front of the saddle. And then you've hollowed your back except your seat bone's up behind you.
Right.
So very few saddles, actually. My dressage saddle, I have the classical 3-point seat. My two seat bones are straight down, and the rise of the twist meets the angle of my pubic bone perfectly. I have no pain. It's the right width. And so I have that support, but I don't have to put myself in a position to make that contact. You
don't have to work to get there.
Okay. Yeah. And so that's the thing is, if you try to make a 3-point position, the pubic bone and the two sit bone, with the saddle not fitting you well, you've had to alter the position of the pelvis. But if you align your pelvis and the saddle really fits you well, you can have contact with the pubic bone and it's fine. It doesn't hurt. Totally comfortable.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Good question.
And that brings me to think about the discussion that comes up about the male's pelvis versus the female's pelvis and the anterior tilt.
I love that one.
And yeah. So you're definitely the person I want to ask about that more than anybody else.
So So here's the really fascinating thing. In the English saddle world, everybody's making a big deal that women need a wide twist and, you know, blah, 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 and men in the middle and pelvis are really different. When I go to the Western world, all the ground seats on all the Western saddles are too wide for women.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So
yes.
How are the men riding it if they need a narrower one and it's already too wide for the women?
Right.
Right? So I don't
right.
get that. So the bottom line is, whether you're a man or a woman, and whatever discipline you ride, the saddle needs to fit you. And I have yet to meet two people that are that identical. I mean,
that's too simple of a philosophy, Wendy. We can't build a marketing campaign based off of that. The saddle needs to fit.
Sorry. Sorry. But, you know, one of the things that I put up an article on my Facebook business page a while ago, and I should repost it, because it was a very interesting archaeology study, and they were looking at pelvises. And so the variations that they were showing was the angle at which the hip socket is set. In other words, we just tend to think that all hip sockets are set at the same angle. They're not.
Oh.
And we tend to think that all femurs are the same, but they're not. Some have a longer neck, some have a shorter neck, some have a forward angle, some have a different tilt, a different slant. And so this whole idea of male pelvis and female pelvis is based solely on the idea of the distance between the hip bones, as opposed to all these other factors that play in.
Yeah.
Some pelvises are deeper front to back. Some are more shallow. Some are broader, but the feet bones are more narrow. Some are less broad than the feet bones. So when you start to think of the possibilities of differences, it's huge.
It's endless. Yeah.
Right. And I see many women that the saddles are, people go, well, actually, I can remember years and years ago, I'm talking 94 or something. I went to Devon Mower Show, and a friend of mine, she was repping a saddle that was making a claim about women needing a wider seat. And I sat in this thing and I felt like I had a dinner plate between my legs. I mean, I don't have an overly wide pelvis. I'm not overly narrow either. I haven't had children, so my pelvis didn't change shape. But women, when they have children, if they have it that way, you know which way I mean, the pelvis has to get soft from oxytocin, and the ligaments get soft, and the bones can shift, and they may not necessarily come back the same. I can't tell you how many women they're returning to riding after having babies, and they're like, I can't find my feet anymore.
Right.
And I make an eighth of an inch change to where they're looking, and they're like, oh, there it is. They're just looking slightly in the wrong place. So the chocolate and vanilla for me is way too simplistic. And it doesn't hold up when you go across disciplines, because the women's Western saddle, I'm constantly, in fact, I'm in the process of a prototype way in which to make the ground seat more narrow without having to buy a whole saddle, because so many women struggle in their Western saddles with seats are too wide.
Yes. Well, and I know that was a big thing with like the ranch saddles and that sort of thing when the Lady Wade, right, was made with a more narrow twist for the female rider. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So here we are. Once again, it's like it doesn't hold up when you go cross discipline. So either the theory is off, or how we're using that theory. I don't know. All I know is it's got to fit the individual.
Yeah. Well, that makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah. And there's many more factors than just width.
Yeah. I'm really interested in reading that article that you mentioned. I'm going to have to hunt for that.
Oh, yeah. I'll see if I can find it and repost it, because it had pictures of all these different femurs and things. It was like super cool, because you were like, oh, there's many more factors here than just simply, wide. And the thing is, the pelvis can be very wide at the top, at the iliac crest, and still be narrow at the bottom, right?
Oh, sure, right.
So that's the thing, is there's a bunch of different options here. It's not so simple.
Right. That's very interesting. And for anybody listening here, I'll make sure that when we find that, I post it to the comments on this video also, so that folks can read that, because that sounds super interesting to me. So there was, where are we here? So Simon has asked a question. how do you think that new stirrup designs affect the foot position? And this is something now we see so many different stirrups out there. It's like every day there's a new one coming out, particularly in the English world, maybe not so much in the Western world.
So I do not want my students riding in any stirrups that have hinges on the sides. And the reason for that is that when you apply pressure to the bottom of the stirrup, those side pieces, those joints are going to hinge, and they're going to move the heel forward down toward the horse's front foot and put the knee into greater extension. And the issue isn't just the fact that you lose your shock absorbing joint. We actually inadvertently did a little study where we had the computer saddle pad underneath the saddle, and a woman got on, and she had the hingy stirrups on the saddle. And what they saw on the pressure pad was red splashes at the stirrup bars. And so she didn't like those stirrups, and they changed them to rigid stirrups where the side bars were rigid, and the red splashes went away.
Oh, very interesting.
We're right back to physics, because as that stirrup hinges, you have more downward force being exerted, right? Because now you have acceleration of the foot driving down. And as it's doing that, the force is traveling up the stirrup leather to the stirrup bar. And so every single time that stirrup hinges, you're increasing the pressure on the stirrup bars. You're putting more pressure on the horse's back. But at the same time, you're destabilizing. So those two lines I talked about, the line off the thigh and the line off the back of the leg, you just took that back line off the back of the calf and shot it way forward because the hinge is going forward, and you reduced your base of support.
Right, because you haven't changed that upper line from the thigh.
Correct.
Interesting.
And so now you have this hinging effect, which destabilizes your leg, which increases the pressure on the stirrup bar. And people say, well, I don't have knee pain. Well, yeah, because your knee gets to straighten. So you're basically making your pattern of bracing against the stirrup easier, because the stirrup keeps breaking away from that pressure, but the horse is suffering for it.
Yes.
So
interesting. Well, it's every time I see those stirrups with the hinges like you're talking about, it takes me back in my head of a clinic that I did with you where you were using the plate underneath the rider's foot.
Oh yeah, I'm still working on that.
Okay. And then you stuck me in this set of stirrups that was like a bear trap. Well,
the Chinese had a full foot stirrup. If you go back more than 2,000 years, and you look at stirrups that are over 2,000 years old, you're going to see platforms. You're going to see foot stirrups that were underneath the entire foot.
Right, like a shoe, basically.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting. Okay, so we have a listener that wants me to ask what I think of as my dreaded question, wants me to ask the question about treeless. Okay.
So the reason that we wound up with treeless is that there were treed saddles that weren't working for horses. Okay. And so some horses, like our horses have changed from, you go back again to cavalry, the 50s and 60s and even 70s, the horses were fit. They were ridden hard. They were lean. And if you look at the old McClellan saddle, it was basically an A-frame saddle. And modern horses are broader in the ribs and they're fatter, okay, just as a class. So the trees didn't really keep up with the horses changing shape. And so to solve the problem of the short-backed wide horse with no withers, where no tree was fitting, we wound up with treeless saddle, okay? And I always tell people, I'm not against any particular saddle, but it's really important that you understand the pluses and minuses so that when you start to have a problem, you know what's going on. So, like I always say, you can drink the poison if you have the antidote. If you know it's going to cure you, you can drink it.
Right, sure.
Right? But if you don't know and you drink it, you could die. So the thing with a treeless saddle and is that there is no tree. So if you have stirrups on that treeless saddle, and those straps are going over the top, which for security, stitching a stirrup to the side isn't necessarily a great idea. So because of the structural strength of it.
Mm-hmm.
But if it is going over the top, you now have strap pressure over the horse's back.
Right.
Because you have not distributed that weight and that pressure over a large surface area. You've concentrated it. The same is true of the girth. So it's going to pull down
mm-hmm.
on a band around the horse.
Right.
There is no tree to distribute the rider's weight. So the endurance horses that only walk and do 25 miles, Dr. Harmon has told me that they've come in with 2 little white hairs marked from the rider's feet bones because the pressure damages the hair follicles
mm-hmm.
because you're not distributing the weight.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the rider, the treeless saddles typically don't have a way to make a seat that's going to fit the rider. So you're stuck with whatever shape your horse is, and most likely you got a treeless saddle because you had a really wide horse and there wasn't a tree that fit him, so now you have a really wide treeless saddle, and that puts you in either you have to go more into a chair seat or you just can't straddle the width. So it has an effect on the rider.
Oh, gotcha, sure. So not only is it potentially not helping the horse, but it's not going to be helping the rider either.
Correct. But, if it's the only thing that fits your horse and you've tried,
mm-hmm.
to find a saddle with a tree and you can't find the one that fits, then, you just have to keep in mind that you've got to watch these things.
Yeah.
And one of the things a treeless saddle does not do well with is a high-withered horse because there's no tree, you can't create the arch at the front the way you can with a treed saddle.
Right.
And in fact, if you look at the evolution of treeless saddles, you'll see how they're building in more and more of an arch and more of a cantle, and they're gradually working back to a tree. They have panels now instead of just being a pad. And so all the reasons why we have a tree, you can see the evolution of the treeless saddle slowly and gradually moving in that direction.
Coming back to basically having a tree of support. Interesting. Yeah. And that's something, I'm glad you brought that point up, because that's something that I encountered at a clinic recently with this. I don't even know what it was. It was a neoprene something or another. But it was, the challenge with the horse was, bucking. The challenge was he was resistant to the rider, mounting, resistant to all these things. And when you looked at it, the strap came right over the withers. For the stirrups or just behind the withers rather, for the stirrups and for the girth, of course. And the whole thing was basically a solid pad of neoprene that was just putting an incredible amount of pressure on the withers to the point that the neoprene pad itself was compressed and crushed at the withers.
Yeah.
And this wasn't a particularly high withered horse. He had a good set of withers, but I wouldn't say, he wasn't like one of those shark fin kind of high withered horses that we sometimes see. And man, it was causing all sorts of problems for him. Right. And the unfortunate thing that I find with a lot of those, with any saddle, doesn't matter if it's treeless or not, is that somebody who doesn't know any different is sold a bill of goods by somebody who's got basically the marketing plan, or they've got the speech behind why, for one reason or another, that's better for the horse, when in fact there's a laundry list of other reasons why it's worse for the horse.
Right. It comes down to fit. And you have to, again, if you know your poison, you can drink the Kool-Aid.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have to keep an eye out for strap pressures, point pressures, wither pressures, you can, while you're looking for a saddle that fits or your horse is changing shape or that sort of thing, make do. But if you're going to ride consistently in a treeless saddle, you just really have to be aware of some of the downside. Definitely on the rider side, because there isn't a tree, you don't have the ability to have your legs necessarily underneath you like you would in a regular, saddle with a tree. So, but again, I have seen treeless saddles work in situations where nothing else worked.
Right.
There's a mule out in Washington State I can think of, and this woman was rather large, and her mule was quite A-frame, and she found a treeless saddle, and it really, really works for them.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've seen other times when it really, really doesn't work.
Yep.
So,
absolutely.
You know, sadly, I can't tell you what to get. I just can tell you it has to fit you both.
Yeah, right, right. And it either does or it does not.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And I always, let's put it this way. When I look at a saddle for someone, if I get 75 to 80%, as long as it's not a broken tree or something like that, but if I can get in the 75 to 80% range, I'm really happy. To find a saddle that's in the 90% range, hard to do. 100%, it doesn't exist.
Right, right.
So, you know, when people are looking for the perfect saddle, they can wind up never getting a saddle because they want the perfect saddle. And, you know, we get so attached to our equipment. It's fascinating to see how people get, there's an emotional bond to the saddle that is inexplicable. And I had it when I was a kid, and I finally took that blue ribbon and tore it apart.
Yep.
But, you know, there's something about the nostalgia and the mystique and the smell of the leather. It's our saddle, you know. Like
Right.
I went into a barn one time, and the saddle had a broken tree. And this was a hunter, a very expensive hunter. And the saddle had a broken tree. And the guy was like, "Oh, but that's my favorite saddle."
Oh, gosh.
I'm like, it was an Hermes. It had a broken tree. I don't care what it is.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, my
You know,
gosh.
people get attached to their equipment.
This is so true. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's so true. Okay. All right. So let's see. We're doing what you and I normally do, and we're going for a long time.
Rambling?
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't call it rambling. No, because there's nothing invaluable about it. I think rambling is when there's a lack of value.
Okay.
Let's talk. I want to make sure. I know you touched on it earlier, but it's definitely my favorite of the books that you've written, of the things that I've seen that you've put out. So I want to make sure that we touch on again. Your Simplify Your Riding book has been re-released.
Yay!
I was so excited when you made that announcement.
So I wrote that book. It came out in 2004. Came out the same year I bought my house. And it was a collection of articles that I originally wrote for the Trail Less Traveled, when Emily Kitching was editor there. And the book came out, and it did great, and I was with a small publisher. And anyway, long story short, the book went out of print. I got the rights back, and just when I was ready to reprint, the market crashed in 2008. So it's taken me 10 years and a lot of angst and wrangling, but it is finally back in print. And I agree with you. I've had people tell me that it's their absolutely favorite instructional horse book.
Yes.
So I go through, it's highly illustrated, 250 pictures or 230 pictures, and also drawings. And I go through the basic position, and then the timing of the aids, and then how to be strong without a lot of effort, the unbendable arm idea. And so it's, you know, if I had not loved this book so much and had so many people be so supportive of it, I don't know that it would have resurfaced, but I'm really glad it's here.
Yes, for sure. For sure. That's
so
fantastic.
So now it's just the forward.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because the article, it really originally came out in articles, and to paraphrase her forward, she was concerned that because the material was in articles, it would get lost, and she was so glad to see it come out as a book.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
I lent my copy of it, and in fact, I will admit I'm guilty of, I never got the whole way through it. Before I lent it, I'm really good at when someone gets injured, I lend them half my library. And so I'm sure that that's what happened. Because I figure, oh, you know, on your downtime, read this, and you can improve in your downtime. And I'm sure that that's what happened. And I don't remember who it was, and I never got it back. But I remember I was halfway through it. I thought, this is fantastic. This is great. And so I lent it out, and I wish I could remember who too, but never got it back. So
not to worry, you can get another copy now.
I know. I'm so excited. I was so excited whenever you put out that notice about it. So fantastic. Good. So for any of our listeners, again, that's Simplify Your Riding, and that's been re-released. And I'll make sure that we put a link up to that too, so that folks can find that.
Yeah, and if they tell me who to, like when I autograph them, if they don't specify, sometimes I'm concerned they might be a Christmas present for somebody, so I don't put a name in. But if in the comments when they order, they just tell me who to sign the book to, then I'll write their name in.
Oh, that's fantastic. Great.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I autograph them.
Awesome. Okay, so now talking about simplifying our riding. And I just got back a couple days ago from filming, finalizing the filming of an online in-hand course that I'm doing with Callie at CRK Training. And so let's touch on you have 2 courses now, right, that you do with Callie?
Actually 3.
3 courses. Okay, so let's talk about those.
So the first one is the Effortless Rider.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a short course called, what's it called? ABC of the Eighth. It's about the, I've forgotten the title of the course now. Sorry. But it's a
That's
short,
okay.
like you'd think I'd remember. And then the third course that we're working on now is a jumping course. And the jumping course is, it's for anybody who wants to go over anything from a log to, a hunt course. It's not just for, people who want to jump seriously, because so many people want to be able to, like, either shorten their stirrups and, pick up some speed or do little jumps and logs out on the trail. So there's some that was a fun course to film. We brought up Jen from Costa Rica for the second half, and I put her on Al.
Awesome.
He actually got to earn his living for a little while. Callie rode, like I gave her a jumping lesson in the spring, and so we have footage from her first lesson with me to when we just filmed, and the progression is really great.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so there's a lot of really great stuff in that course. I'm not sure when it'll get released, because now that she has your course and my course, there's a lot of editing to be done.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
But the Effortless Rider course, we've launched that, I think, 3 times, and it's been super well received. Really, really happy to read and work with the folks that have, I've gotten comments from people how much it's helped them, and just really fun.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So how does, let's think specifically about the Effortless Rider course. How does that course work? Which is just as curious for me, thinking ahead to what I'm getting involved in now that I'm doing this in-hand course. Because I know you still go back there, right? You go back to Callie's and you do more updates and stuff.
Yeah, we've launched it 3 times, and Callie and I are talking about taking it now and just having it available that people can sign up anytime. In the past, what we've done is have people go through as a group, so that it's like having a class and everybody kind of gets to know each other and can share, ask questions and kind of get to know each other as a group.
Okay.
But we're thinking about changing that now so people can sign up anytime. And I don't know when that's going to shift to that, Dr. Callie. But basically, Callie does all the promotion and stuff. And then when we launch the course, people sign up, and then they have access to the content for the rest of their life. So Callie and I felt really strongly, like some courses, they give you access for a certain period of time, and then they take the access away. And Callie and I felt that it was important for people to have lifetime access. So if you sign up for the course once, you can go back anytime and watch all the videos. And then we've had live events where people have come to Callie's place and basically had a clinic with me for 2 days. So we do unmounted and mounted work. And because Callie has school horses, people can come that don't have, can't bring their own horse in. And then we've also done Q&As and that sort of thing where people will have questions. If they have questions during the course and they write them in the comments, Callie makes a digest and sends me a digest, and then I answer all the questions, and then they repost it. And then we'll do Q&As live, and we'll get together and people can call in or, type in. They can be there live and type their questions in, and we'll answer their questions live. So I actually have quite a bit of contact with the folks taking the course in that way.
Awesome.
They can get to me either by, writing questions. And also we offer one video analysis. So if they take a video of their riding and send it in, I'll watch it and critique it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. So and the thing is, I had no experience with doing anything like this before, and I have to say it's been a fabulous experience working with Callie. And what's so fascinating, Patrick, is that everywhere I go, people walk up to me and go, "That Callie King, and we loved your course," and and it's just,
that's awesome.
It fascinating to me how far-reaching it's gone, which is really just super, because that's the whole idea, is to help people with their riding when they can't get to a clinic or I don't come near their area.
Right. So they can still have access to you as an instructor, and they have the lesson plans, and they have the support of the program, even if they don't have you right there in the backyard or in the arena.
Yep.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I know she kind of, I won't say she had to twist my arm, but she definitely had to talk me into the idea of doing the in-hand course.
We're still trying to talk Joyce into doing the saddle fitting course, okay?
Oh, there you go. That would be fantastic.
Twisting that arm.
Yes, and it's interesting, as I spent the time with her filming the course and going through all the things that we did, and I did a lecture and all the stuff that's involved with that, and she's got the facility set up in such a fantastic way to do everything that you need to do. It helped me to realize how many options there could be for courses, like you're talking about, the saddle fit courses, or gosh, nearly anything.
Yeah, so we've got a couple. I mean, I always have ideas, so we have a bunch of ideas in the works. The jumping course is the one that we filmed, but we are working on another one. I don't even want to talk about it yet because I don't want to get people interested. It's going to be a little while till we work out all the bits and pieces for it. It's actually going to be it'll be really fun, but it's still in the early stages. But we're working on other ideas. Yeah, I mean, you can't always get everybody to the same location, or you can't go to every location. So this is another way for people to access information, and especially if they're more visually oriented. Like, I have tons of exercises they can do off the horse as well as on the horse in my course, so that they, it's not just horse contact time. There's other things they can be working on to improve their body awareness in their riding.
And I was really impressed too with the idea of the workbook and the discussion groups, and just all of the stuff that gets involved with it. It's like all of your senses are able to get involved. So whatever style of learning is your prime style of learning, it feels like, or it seems like, that she's really able to touch on all of those.
Yeah, no, Carolie's really, every time you turn around, she's making improvements on it. And so, it's constantly evolving and tweaking and making improvements and little changes and stuff like that. And, so yeah, she's really sharp. I mean, it's really fun.
Yeah. Oh, and it helps too that her crew is great. Her and her crew are great to work with.
Yeah.
So,
oh yeah.
So much fun.
It's a great crew. They work really well together. They're, I have done a lot of filming with different people, and I know you've done some as well. And, there's this group, they really have their act together. They, like Ken now, I don't know if he did this with you, but he got new mics, and so he put it in my hat, so that he, if I turn my head, he doesn't lose sound. Did he do that with you?
No. Interesting.
See, you're not up on the latest.
Oh, man. It's probably because I have a big enough mouth that no matter what happens, they don't lose the audio.
Yeah. Well, it's more just like when I go to Arena Stage, which is the theater in DC, I had noticed for years now that they all have their mics set up through their hair and like coming down over their forehead or tightly over their ear.
Interesting.
Suddenly Ken is like, "Oh, we're going to put this in your head." I'm like, "Oh, I feel like I'm on Arena Stage."
That's really interesting. I'll be darned.
Yeah. Yeah, because then it keeps it incredibly consistent.
Yeah, gotcha.
As opposed to on your lapel. So
right.
Yeah, so he's always like improving his equipment, and they're always just refining things, and it's a really fun group to work with. I enjoy it a lot, and I don't know. What's your did Ken like give you a tag for like I don't ever. He's like, you don't ever have to repeat anything. The only time I have to repeat stuff is when it's like the promotional stuff that I don't have down. But
yeah. Well, I will say that Ken has told me that they get more outtakes from me than anyone. It's kind of bad. It's kind of bad. In fact, he was talking about you. He said, if Wendy ever makes a slip, she just recomposes herself and she goes on. And we have this joke, him and I, that for every 15 minutes of content we have in my course, we have 8 hours of outtakes. It's kind of bad. I'm sure the outtakes will show me going into several different characters and being several different people, just poking fun at myself. Oh my gosh, yeah, I'm sure it's going to be torturous. And so I'm going to admit this live for the whole world to hear. But so when I teach a clinic, anytime I go to the restroom, I take the microphone completely off and leave it on the wall. Because many, many years ago, a fella that I knew actually was telling me a story about how he was teaching a 4-H clinic and he forgot to turn off the microphone and he went into the outhouse. So that's always in the back of my mind, been like a major paranoia. And I was telling Ken that story, and by damned if I didn't do the same thing over lunch the same day. Yeah. It was interesting. It was interesting. So if that ends up in the outtakes, I'm gonna have to kill him, I think, if that ends up in the outtakes.
Actually, it would be Julia that you'd have to kill because she does the editing.
Well, I walked back into the barn and they were about wetting themselves with laughter. And he said it wasn't so funny that it happened because he said everybody does it, when you're filming and whatever, everybody accidentally does something like that. But the fact that I made such a big deal out of it, that I was so mortified about it, and then it ended up happening, it's like, damn it. Well, okay, I got that taken care of. Now one less fear on my checklist. But now
I wonder if I usually, that's going to make me think even
see,
more now.
yeah. Now you're going to be thinking about that. Yep, you're welcome.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
For years, I'll bet you for 15 years, that's been a paranoia that I've had. Now I'm not worried at all.
No, you've done it. You're good.
Right?
We have to prove.
That's it. Yeah, and we caught it on video,
Right. Hey, not video, just audio.
Yeah, well, yeah, thank goodness. Yeah, just audio. Hopefully. Jeez, I don't know. Now I'm a little worried. Yeah, for sure. So, okay. So let's talk about the Surefoot pads. We talked about those, what was it, episode number 13 last year. We talked about the Surefoot pads for the entire episode. So since last year, I know I've seen a lot of folks using Surefoot pads that previously weren't, of course, introduced to them. And I've been seeing some really interesting new ways that people are using the pads. And I'm thinking specifically of stacking. I'm thinking about Felicitas and how she stacks and changes the order of the pads in the stacks and things like that to keep increasing the instability. Talk to me about kind of what's changed since last year.
So, Felicitas has definitely pushed Surefoot to new heights. She's a Grand Prix dressage rider in Maryland who I went up and I gave her a demo in Surefoot. I'm trying to remember now when, over maybe a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago. And then she contacted me because a client came to her barn and she had tried a whole bunch of things, and then she finally said, well, let's try Surefoot. And so they contacted me, and I was happening to go by at the time, and so I stopped at the barn. And the woman, funny enough, was a woman whose name I can't tell you just off the top of my head right now, but she had taken the anatomy and clay courses that I organized at Morgan Park a million years ago. So she actually knew me.
Okay.
And so I spent some time with this horse, and he was definitely very interesting. And then the owner bought a set of pads and left the horse and the pads with Felicitas. And so that's when she really started to mess with them. And she contacted me, and so I went back to see her, and she got a set for herself. I sponsored her, and she got a set of pads because she'd been using her client's pads, and ultimately her client was going to go home. And then one day I'm looking on Facebook, and here's this picture of this horse on 3 pairs of pads in the front and 2 pairs behind. And I was like, what is she doing? So I went to see her, and, this is not for every horse. And her horses, you have to remember, they're in training. They're very well trained. She does stretches. She does many things with her horses. So she's able to stack and combine that with stretches while on the pad. And she gradually built up to this. But it was fascinating. And then other people started stacking pads. And I had done some stacking. It's not that I had never done any stacking, but not to that degree. And since then, I've been more brave of heart and have, not with all horses, but with some horses, experimented more with that idea, because they have to be comfortable when you do that. And that's the basic premise always with Surefoot, is that the horse gets to choose. And if he doesn't want to stand on stacked pads and he steps off, you let him step off.
Right, sure.
But it is fascinating to see how, adding another layer, and of course they're easy to stack because the pads are rectangular and they're designed to be that, to do that with them. How I just stacked a horse today. He's a horse, and this owner got him back. He's 16, and he had wound up in Hawaii, and he had to travel all the way back to Virginia. And she'd had him for a few months and was working on his feet. And when I saw him today, my first thought was, I know you, and I know these feet are way better than when this horse got here, but these feet are still bad. And then they showed me the pictures of his feet when he arrived, and they were horrendous. And I also looked at his feet and thought, this horse has had laminitis, but I didn't say it out loud. And then I started working with him, and he instantly got comfort from the very first foot on, the very first pad, and kept wanting to poke his left front out more or have it back more. And then by the end, he was perfectly square, and I had him stacked in front. But that's when she told me that he had had laminitis 4 times in his life.
Oh, wow.
I think it was 4 times. And, it was clear that he it just brought him so much comfort. It instantly obvious. And the way he moved changed, and he kept dragging his owner back to me. She was mounted at the time, but, it's been such an amazing journey that started in May of 2012 when I put the first horse on pads. And now I have people all around the world, Brazil, South Africa. Susan Von Dietz. Do you know who Susan Von Dietz is?
I do.
She is Felicitas' cousin.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
So Felicitas has a sister in Germany, Isabel, and Susan Von Dietz is their cousin. Gotcha. And so Suzanne contacted me, and she's going to Japan, and she'd seen the pads from her cousins and worked with them a little bit, and was so excited that she's actually going to an expo in Japan and is going to take Surefoot to. So we're around the world. We're Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Europe, Sweden, Finland, Germany, Italy, Czechoslovakia. I mean, it's really, it's really so exciting. And so I had this one woman from Australia call me, Robin, and she got her pads and immediately went to the Shahrazad 400K endurance ride, which is 400 Ks in 5 days. So they're doing 80 Ks a day.
Oh, wow.
And she's been a physical therapist at this ride for this was her 7th year. And so the horses she says typically like on day 3 is when they kind of really start to crash. Okay. And she sees a compression pattern in their legs because a lot of times they're going down bitumen roads that are cambered. So you're on a slope and hard roads. And so she got her pads and she immediately took them with her and started working with the horses and did maybe 2 to 3 minutes per horse. And I don't know how many horses were in her care, but a number of them. And she said at the end of the ride, she didn't see the compression pattern that she had seen for the 6 years prior.
Interesting. Wow.
And that was only with minutes on the pad.
Right.
Minutes. So, you know, I talked to her at length, and we're also going into dogs now. We're designing surefoot pads for dogs that have some texture on them so they're not flippy. We've got some sled dogs that have been on surefoot. We're going to have to call it sure paws or something.
Right, right.
And now I have three or four different people that are going to start doing research on surefoot. So there's a university in Australia called Charles Strutt, and the vet down there, Raquel Butler, she's been in contact with me now, and she's just got me they've just gotten the approval to do the study. And so they're going to start doing some research, because I applied last year to the ISES with an abstract, but they said, you have no research. And I'm like, I know.
Right.
And it's been a struggle, but it now looks like I have 2 universities and 2 people in physical therapy that are getting advanced degrees that are going to be doing some research. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, we all know it works. Once you see a horse on the pads, you know it works. But it'd be
Right.
really nice to have some research just to kind of give it, to have that.
To give it more solid legs. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So for the folks that are listening that maybe have not heard of the surefoot pads, or they're not understanding how they work, can you give us, again, going back to the elevator speech, right? Can you give us the elevator speech on the surefoot pads?
Elevator speech.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, so surefoot is where horses are offered different density foam pads that are specifically designed and engineered for horses. And the horses become self-aware, and it affects their proprioception, it affects their nervous system, creating great relaxation. And so you see horses that change their balance, their posture, their behavior, and their movement. And that can happen in as little as seconds. In one session. I mean, it's crazy how fast this thing can. You've seen it.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you try to tell somebody how much change can happen as fast as it happens, no, it's not going to happen every time.
Right.
But it's so fast. In fact, Dr. Stephen Peters, the guy who wrote Evidence-Based Horsemanship, I was telling him about surefoot, and then I went and spent 8 hours at his place working with his horses. And he said he saw breathing changes in under 10 seconds. And we actually started timing it. You can see neurological changes expressed by the expression on the horse's face in as little as 3 to 10 seconds.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy fast. It's crazy fast in terms of seeing those immediate changes. And it can create permanent change. Literally, I've seen it make permanent change in one session. But some horses, like Snip, needed to be exposed to the pad on a very frequent basis over a much longer period of time. So, in humans, you can see change in pattern on 4 different time frames. You can see immediate change, short-term change, medium-term, that's like 6 months, and then to completely repattern some people, it'll take up to 2 years to make that the go-to pattern in the brain.
Okay.
And with surefoot, I see similar things. Some horses, you see instant changes that stick. Some horses need repeated exposure for a short period of time. Some horses, it's mid-range, and then Snip is your 2-year to make it the new norm.
Gotcha.
But the pads trigger neurochemicals in the brain, dopamine, acetylcholine, endorphins, and that's evidenced by the facial features and the changes in posture that you see. And the thing is, when I talk to people, whether it's performance horse or pleasure horse or trail horse, tension is the enemy. So tension is what robs the horse of good performance.
Right.
It's what can create potential injuries. It causes problems in relationships. And so if we can reduce the horse's tension, what we find is that they either already know how to do what we're asking and the tension was preventing them, or they're more trainable because they're relaxed.
Right.
So Surefoot puts them in a mental state of relaxation where they can be more receptive to information or get rid of the tension that's preventing them from being able to do it properly. And in rehabilitation, it brings comfort. So those horses keep their balance organized, keep working the little tiny postural muscles while they're in recovery. So that's the beauty of Surefoot, is you can apply it in so many different circumstances, during a riding lesson, during a training session, in the barn, in rehab. In fact, Colorado State University, when the horses come in for rehab, they get put on Surefoot pads, and then the pads get sent home with the horse so that they can continue the process.
That's fantastic. Wow.
So today I was just talking to a farrier by the name of James Gilchrist. And so, do you know Daisy Bicking?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. Daisy Bicking is a farrier that's in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And she was going to WEG to be one of the farriers at WEG. There were 40 farriers at WEG.
Okay.
So I sent 6 or 8 half physio pads and then a set of pads down to WEG for the farriers to use them with the horses at the competition. And James Gilchrist, I think he was the head farrier. He was down in Wellington, and I talked to him today. And while he was at WEG, he got a call that a Swedish horse from the Swedish team was coming to him, and it had a problem. And the horse came into the area, and he immediately recognized this horse was laminitic. And he put the horse on the physio pads that we have, which are designed for farriers. And he says it bought him enough time that they could then get the horse iced, get the horse dealt with, get him stabilized, and be able to send him home. And I actually have a picture of this horse standing on the pads. They're not even out of the wrappers.
Oh, no kidding. That was quick.
And he just put him down and immediately put this horse on. And he says he still has his pads and he still uses them. And he said it really made a difference.
Wow.
Yep.
That's fantastic.
So whether you're talking about offering the horse comfort or helping change behavior, change posture, help change habits, make the horse more comfortable. I mean, it has, improved performance. The beauty of it is it has so many ways in which you can use it. But the bottom line is, remember all that stuff I talked about, the rider's foot and the foot in relation to the stirrup? Well, the horse's foot in relation to the ground is absolutely critical. It's absolutely critical. It's everything, right? No hoof, no horse.
Right, exactly.
So how that foot meets the ground is going to determine how balanced that horse is, how he moves, what his stride is like, how well he can carry the rider's weight. Because everything has to translate from and to the ground. His body in relation to the ground in relation to his foot. And if he's not secure, if he's not getting good contact, if he's got habits in relation to his feet to the ground, that's going to affect him. Surefoot, this is the elevator speech. Surefoot brings that horse's awareness to his feet using controlled unstable surfaces so that the horse becomes self-aware and reorganizes his own posture, behavior, and balance.
That's it right there. There you go. Well, we've made it up 147 floors now in the elevator, and no, we got there. That is so great, though. That is so great. And something, I think one of my favorite parts about the Surefoot pads is how the horse has, which I know is huge, and it's one of your major premises. The horse has a say.
Absolutely.
The horse can just say, "Okay, look, I've had enough. I'm done." And that's something that I've seen since I started using the pads. And I think I told you about this whenever I had a time period where I was sitting still for 2 months and doing some training horses. I would have every horse that was in training while they were being groomed and while whatever was going on, they would stand on the pads for a period of time. And I had 2 horses in the same month that would stand on the pads under their front feet for a certain amount of time, and then they would actually push them back to the hind feet and step up on them with their hind feet.
That's so cool.
And that to me was like, that was the selling point. And I know I've told you this several times, that when they first came out, I kind of thought, oh geez, this is kind of a hokey thing, you know, what is this? But one of the people who I know is maybe more skeptical than me, definitely more skeptical than me with anything, is you. And if it wasn't for that, I would have not even given them a second look, to be honest with you, to be perfectly honest with you, because it seems like one of those things that's too easy or too good to be true. And they've proven themselves to me time and time again. And I know I've talked to you about this, how I've even utilized the pads with trailer loading horses.
Yeah.
With horses that could not handle the instability of being in the trailer. And I've used the pads outside the trailer, and then I've dared to use the pads inside the trailer. I certainly don't recommend it for most people because I've been nearly struck in the face several times with horses that are seriously worried. You know, yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a, you know, you got to know what you're doing when you do that. But I've found it to be really, really helpful there also. So it's definitely, like you said, it's across the entire spectrum of anything we could ask a horse to do. The Surefoot pads really does offer support.
And, you know, it like anything, it's not going to work with every horse,
sure.
But it works with, you know, it's a bell curve, and the number of horses that don't want it is so small relative to the number that do. Like, that it's really, it's fascinating. You know, if somebody had walked up to me and said, I'm going to put this squishy foam pad underneath your horse's foot, and he's going to let down and relax until we change the way he moves,
right,
I would look at me and say, you're crazy.
Right.
So, you know, I mean, but time and time and time again, this keeps happening. And one of the things, you know, like I look at the footing that horses are on, and like when I first started, I went to Holland, which is all sand. And so you're like, if it's about a movable surface, which sand is, then it wouldn't have an effect. But it does have an effect even there. And so there's something that we have yet to discover that is why this is so powerful and effective. And I still don't know what that answer is. But I've been doing this for so long, and not just me now. There's hundreds, maybe thousands of people out there using Surefoot with horses that are having the same results, that I know it's real. And it's repeatable, and it's simple, and horse owners can do this with their own horse. So even if the horse is under treatment, and I was just down at Fernando Cardenas, is the vet with a rehab center down in North Carolina, and it's like, you know, you can come and work on the horse, but this is something the owner can do in between your visits to keep the process going and keep the horse at least maintaining, if not improving. And so, you know, it has so many different places where you can apply it, and it's portable. You can throw it in your trailer and take it to a horse show. Right,
exactly.
And take it out to the arena or bring it into the barn. So, you know, it's unlike other things that are big and bulky and heavy and then you can't move. This can go with that horse, and I actually use that to get horses to relax. Is that once I get them used to the pads, then I take the pads to a place where they're not so sure. Like say in the arena there's a scary corner, and then I conflict them and I say, would you like to feel good and stand on the pad, or would you like to be scared? You pick. And the horses are designed to come down. They're designed to relax. And so they choose the pads, and then they let down, and then the scary corner isn't scary anymore because now it has the yummy Surefoot pad.
Right. Which is a really amazing use of, you know, the nervous system and the associations and all of that stuff. So that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Because at that point, we're switching from the offering the way, you know, you say where the horse gets to vote, but now I know the horse has already voted and he likes it. So now I can actually use it for behavior modification in a positive way, which apparently, did you see the article I posted on Facebook? I think it was last week.
I don't think I have. Oh.
Something that would take 400 times repetition to make a pattern. If it's fun, it takes
I did
10
see that.
times.
Yes, I did see that. Something about play associated with learning. Yes.
Right.
Yes,
So,
that was
so if we
fascinating.
can make it fun for the horses, like something that they go, oh, I really like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I get to stand on the Sherpa pads for a while.
Right.
Then they're going to learn a lot faster because we're positively engaging them.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, cool stuff. So Judy sent in a question. Have you thought of making stall mats out of the Surefoot material?
We have, but the reason that we're not going that direction is, one, that the material that we use is very high quality foams, and the cost would be really, really expensive.
Mm-hmm.
But the other reason is that the Surefoot itself is about awareness, and when everything is the same and it's the same on a regular basis, you lose that awareness, you lose the intrigue.
Yep.
So, you know, you think of the first time you've done something and you're really like very aware of it and very paying attention, but then say somebody gives you chocolate the first time, it's great, and then they give you chocolate 3 times a day for every meal. Pretty soon you're not going to really be interested in chocolate anymore.
Right, right.
So it's keeping it curious.
Mm-hmm. And then my mind goes to also, if it's a stall mat and the horse is closed into the stall, now he doesn't have the vote to leave. He doesn't have the vote to step off the mats when he's
and
done.
I've actually seen where if you put horses on a surface that's too soft, that has too much give and they're not used to it, they spend a night on it and they look like they've got a sensory problem the next day because you fatigue them so much.
Gotcha. Yes. I remember having that conversation with you about, is there a too long to allow the horse to stay on the pads? And that was what we talked about, is you can, because of the micromuscular movements, you can overwork the horse basically by having them stand on the pads.
Yeah, they can actually get sore. So in the beginning, I keep the sessions shorter, and then I'll gradually, like some horses don't want to get off, but if they're swaying a lot, I will take them off after 5-10 minutes because I don't want to fatigue them to the point where they're going to be sore the next day. Right.
Makes sense. Makes sense. That's fantastic. All right, I'm checking off of our list here. So, do you have any new projects in the works that you can tell us about?
Well, I've got 2 retreats and we're going to Portugal. I'm going to Portugal with you.
Yes, I'm so excited about that. And actually, we have a few listeners I've seen come in here, Karen and Krista, that are going to be in Portugal with us also. So it's really cool, this whole Portugal adventure deal. There's a lot of folks that have been that we see on a regular basis.
You'll either love having me or you'll hate having me. I don't think there's going to be a middle.
I'm going to love having you there. I'm so excited that you're going to be there with us. And for the folks listening that don't know about our little Portuguese or our European tours that we do in the winter, January, February is typically the month where we head over at this point to Portugal to study at Valença Classical Riding with Senor Luis Valença, who was the primary apprentice to Nuno Oliveira. And he and his family are, to me, for all the people that I know, some of the absolute best when it comes to classical riding and dressage. And so I'm so excited to have the chance to spend this much time riding with you and just hanging out with you.
Yeah, it's going to be my vacation.
Perfect. It's mine too. It's mine too. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but you're working vacation. Me, it's just vacation. Like when I take people to Africa, by the way, I'm going back September 2020. So.
Oh, fantastic.
I mean, yes, it's a vacation, but I feel I brought people with me, so there's a level of responsibility.
Yes.
So this time it's all your responsibility.
I get to play Mama Duck and make sure you stay in line. And
if I stray, you're gonna have to figure out how to get me back in the herd.
That's it. Well, I know Callie is going to be in your group also, and so you and Callie are going to be tied together with a ribbon. Everybody has to have a friend, and we have to check in with our friends. And no, it is going to be so much fun. Have you been to Portugal yet?
No, I haven't.
Oh, I can't wait for you to experience it. I tell everybody this. I could tomorrow I could move to Portugal and just be there.
Wow.
I love it. I love it.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So that's exciting. And then in February, I have 2 retreats in Costa Rica.
Fantastic.
That Callie and I have organized. And then in March, I'm going back to Equitana in Essen, Germany.
Awesome.
It'll be my 3rd time. So it's every 2 years. So it'll be 6 years. And I'll be taking Surefoot there again. Only this time, since 2 years ago, I now have a team of over 25 physical therapists that are licensed to use Surefoot in their practices and do demos and things. So I'll have people that can actually speak German. Last time I just had my dear friend Brynja, who is in charge of all those 25 folks now. But having one person speak German to all the Germans that come by, it's now going to be a team.
That's
so
fantastic.
I'm really excited about that.
Good.
And I'm going to be at the team celebration, the Tellington Jones celebration in Santa Fe. I've got a busy travel schedule this first quarter.
Wow. You're going to be racking up the miles.
Between Costa Rica and Equitana.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Brad's going to have to keep the home fires burning. And then he'll have 2 cats to keep him busy. Don't worry.
Right. Yeah. There you go.
Speaking of bathrooms, he cannot go to the bathroom without 2 supervisors.
The kittens, the cats. No kidding. Oh my goodness.
Yes, they must supervise Brad's bathroom activities. Yes.
Oh my goodness. That's too funny.
So that's a new one. And then I'm working on going to, it's actually New Zealand. Equitana Down Under alternates between Melbourne, Australia, and Auckland, New Zealand. So it'll be in Auckland in November.
Okay.
So I'm working on that. Yeah, it's going to be a busy travel year in terms of big events.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
But I'm super excited about it because, Surefoot's getting around and it's really helping a lot of horses. And that's really, there's only twice in my life I've had something happen in under a minute that has totally changed my life. And the first time was when the horse rolled over me.
Yeah, I was just thinking the first time I'm pretty sure was not a positive thing, but in the long run.
It turned into a positive thing.
Right. In the long run, it was positive. In the immediate sense, it was certainly not.
It was a bit painful, yeah. And the second time was Surefoot, and it's really, I'm as excited about putting a horse on pads today as I was when I first started this. Because I just, when you see the horses experience that comfort and that relaxation like the horse did today, who has clearly had a lot of pain in his life and, had his feet. They showed me the pictures of his feet when he got here 3 months ago, and they were horrendous. And knowing how painful that must have been for that horse, and then watching his face as he totally chilled and let down. And, it's just so rewarding to see that such a simple thing can be so profound to these horses and really make a difference to them. So, it's like, it is consuming my life.
The tail is wagging the dog, right?
Yeah. Well, Brad's right now picking up a whole other load of pads at our manufacturers up north. So it involves his life too. And he's going to Hook Summit in January because I'll be in Portugal. I was supposed to be with him, but he's going to go on his own again. But it's just, you've seen it. When you see what happens to a horse when they're on the pad, there's no denying it. And you just realize they're just waiting for us to say something to them that's really profound to them.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
exactly.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
So I got a very busy schedule.
That's fantastic. That's good. In this business, busy can be stressful, but it's always a great thing.
Yeah.
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 That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. All right. So we just kicked over the 2-hour mark on here. So I've got some wrap-up questions, unless there's anything more specific that you want to touch on before we do that.
No, I think we've covered everything pretty much. I'm still looking for that article on my Facebook page, so I'm gonna have to find it another way.
Gotcha. Oh, we'll find it, I'm sure. So fantastic. Okay, if there's one specific thing that you'd recommend for riders to focus on as a primary means of improving their horsemanship, what would that be?
locate your hip joints and make sure that they're as fluid as, just locating them and thinking of allowing them to be fluid.
Nice.
Really, it just changes so many things for the horse.
That's very cool. That's very cool. If you could ride with anyone, past or present, who would it be and why?
Oh. I could ride. I might have said him before. Well, Bill Steinkraus. That's what I'm going to say today.
Yes. Yes. Perfect. I do believe you may have mentioned him before. So that's good. I mean, you know, you get bonus points for consistency.
Well, and Jean-Fort Payard, who wrote my favorite book, Understanding Equitation.
Yes.
He's the guy I would love to sit with a drink in a nice place on a sunny day and just talk to. That's awesome. The guy I'd like to pick his brain.
That's awesome. What is your present personal definition of horsemanship?
Ooh, what's my present personal? My present personal definition of horsemanship is someone who is willing to learn and admit that they don't know everything.
Ooh, nice. I love it. What book are you currently reading, or what was the last book you read?
What was it? I'm stuck on that one. I can't think of the title.
Okay, so then I'll throw in a different one. What's one book that you recommend more than any other? Or that you gift maybe to people more than any other?
Well, I don't know if I've said this one before, but one of the books that changed my life was when I was laying in the hospital. A friend of mine came and she handed me a Tellington Jones newsletter for the team method, and she handed me a little book called Illusions by Richard Bach.
Oh,
and Richard Bach wrote Jonathan Livingston Seagull. Okay, if you I don't know if you're okay. And Illusions is the book that it's one of the books that had the greatest influence on me in terms of something that I always think back on. Basically, it's a great story, okay? So I don't want to ruin the story because it's really good. But the whole idea is that it's all about focusing your lens, that everything's already here that you need or that you want. But what you have to do is focus the lens. And so the example in the book is the guy is saying, oh, you know, I don't see anything. And he's like, okay, pick something. So he says, all right, a blue feather. I got to look for a blue feather all day today. Okay, fine. You're going to look for a blue feather. And all day he's looking for a blue feather, and he doesn't find one, he doesn't find one, he doesn't find one. And finally in the evening, they're sitting there in a coffee shop, and there on the back of a milk carton, it's Blue Feather Farms or something like that.
Oh, no kidding. The blue feather. Yeah.
And it's there, and the other, of course, Wizard of Oz is my favorite movie for the same reason that Dorothy had the ruby slippers all the time.
She had the answer the whole time.
She just had to learn how to use them, and she had to go past the flying monkeys before she figured it out.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So she had it all the time. She had the answer. She just didn't know how to click her. That she had to click her heels together. And so she had to have all these experiences to realize that really she had it all the time, and all she had to do was click her heels together. And all this guy had to do was just focus the lens, and it's all here. It's just a question of our perception.
Yes.
And with horses, and this is where with Surefoot is the magnifier. And it shows us what's been there all along, or something that we've missed, or something that the horse is waiting for. And it's been there the whole time, but we just haven't seen it.
Yeah, I love that. And that, just maybe slightly off, but that kind of reminds me of a game my daughter had me playing over Thanksgiving. I picked her up in just outside of Pittsburgh, and we went to just north of Columbus, Ohio, and she had this game that she introduced me to. She calls it bingo. She's 8 already, but it's every time she sees a yellow car, she gets a point basically on this game by shouting bingo. And so it's whoever sees the card first and shouts bingo first, whatever. And, it sounded like a fun little silly game. And how often do you see yellow cars going down the road, right?
Right.
So how many do you think, I know you travel quite a bit also, give a guess to the number of yellow cars that we saw from Pittsburgh to Columbus.
Oh, geez. From Pittsburgh to Columbus. That's how many hour drive?
It was about 4 hours.
I don't know. 200.
It was nearly 200. The number was nearly
Wow.
200 yellow cars that we saw on the road.
Out of thousands and thousands and thousands of cars.
Yep. It was really interesting. And that's one of those things, just like you're saying, it's about focusing the lens. It's like the blue feather, It's when she said that, I thought, oh yeah, we'll see 15. And she's like, no, school buses don't count, construction vehicles don't count. Like she had a whole system to this, and it was nearly 200 yellow cars that we saw.
Wow.
And so it was exactly what you're talking about right there. It was about focusing that lens and just noticing what's always been there.
And sometimes we tend to focus the lens on only seeing a certain slice of, if you will, reinforcing negative thoughts.
Totally.
But we can shift that lens and focus on, and so I had a student this past weekend, and I'm not sure, it was obvious that she has something going on psychologically in her past. And having the audience watch her was really upsetting to her.
Mm-hmm.
And I had her put her anxiety on a number scale of 1 to 10. And she was a 10 at that moment.
Mm.
But by putting it on a number scale, it shifts the focus to giving it a number versus being trapped in the emotion.
Yes.
And it turns out at one clinic I had a psychologist or somebody who watched me do this with another student. And she said, do you realize that when you do that, you're actually shifting into a different part of the brain?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, no, I had no idea. But by doing that, it shifted her focus. She dropped from a 10 to a 5 in less than 30 seconds and could do the lesson.
Oh, wow.
So all I did was refocus her lens.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
put it on a number scale, and immediately she could then function, and she could think, and she could process. But if I just left her over in the other part of her brain and didn't refocus the lens, she couldn't do anything. She was paralyzed.
Wow.
So, it's when we find ourselves kind of in those loops.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's not easy, but again, if we could just, even if you refocus it just a tiny little bit,
yes,
and that's true of getting out of pain cycles. Like a friend of mine, a Feldenkrais friend of mine, was in a terrible car accident once, and she was in pain for a long period of time. And so she had to figure out how to get herself out of pain. And what she did was start to shift the focus, like ask yourself, can I move my eyes?
Oh,
it's a
okay.
very simple question, because when you're in a lot of pain, the eyes get very fixed. And so
Mm-hmm.
she just would ask herself that question. And she had a checklist, and she'd keep the checklist with her. Can I move my eyes? Can I move my fingers? Really small, simple things, but it refocuses the lens and gets us out of the cycle.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. There's a book that I'm reading that's similar to that right now. A friend gave it to me, Loving What Is by Byron Katie.
Oh, wow.
Very interesting book. I'm gonna finish it and give it to you in Portugal, I think.
Oh, good.
It's a great book. It's fascinating, and it's about kind of the psychology behind it and changing the way that we think and things like that. It's a fascinating book. I don't know if any of our listeners have read it, but at this point I don't know, maybe halfway through it, and I highly recommend it. It's a really good book. Very similar, in line to what we're talking, but more working on the mental, kind of the attitude side of things, or the questions that we ask ourselves, or the situations we kind of find ourselves in. But same thing. It's about focusing the lens.
Yeah.
So awesome, cool. Okay, stealing a question from another podcaster, Tim Ferriss. If you had a giant billboard to print any message you wanted on it for the whole world to see, what would that message be?
Where's the middle?
I knew you were going to say that too. I could have answered that one for you. I love it.
Yeah. And you know, I've actually thought I should start a podcast, Where's the Middle, because it doesn't matter if it's
I think that's awesome.
Horses,
yes.
Huh?
I think that's awesome. Totally do it.
Yeah, because it doesn't matter. It's where's the middle. Like, it's so easy to get it stuck on the extremes, but it doesn't move us down the road.
Right.
You know, we've got to get to the middle.
Right. I think that's great. That's awesome. Okay. How can folks find you?
I have a website, murdochmethod.com. I'm on Facebook. That's with an H, by the way, MURDOCH. Murdoch Method on Facebook. My YouTube channel is Murdoch Method. Be sure you put method. I have lots of videos there on Surefoot. I have some book readings, a variety of things, writing stuff. And my email is wendy@wendymurdoch.com. So it's pretty simple.
Perfect. Awesome. Awesome. Okay. We've done this enough now. Surely you knew this part was coming. Our question of the day. Our question of the day. You get to ask our question of the day of the audience. Any question you want, they get to answer it in the comments.
What's your favorite horse movie?
Perfect. Perfect. All right. Wendy, thank you again. Thank you so much for coming on here again. This is awesome.
It's always a pleasure, Patrick. And, you know, we're going to have to do one after Portugal just so we can laugh.
Oh, we totally will. You know, I'm thinking we should probably do a broadcast in Portugal. That would be a lot of fun.
That would be awesome, and we'll have Callie there.
Totally.
Yeah, sure.
Like after 6 bottles of Portuguese wine, after a big long dinner, a full meal. Yes, I think we should totally do that. We should totally do that. That was something that I had committed to doing, or I said I was going to do last year, and through technical challenges, through connection problems, things like that, I wasn't able to do it. But I think we're going to be better set up this year to be able to do some broadcasts from Portugal. And I would love to do that with you. I think it would be so much fun.
Oh, that would be really fun.
So, cool. Awesome.
That'd be awesome. Super fun.
You betcha. All right. Well, thank you once again. And please hang in there with me for a moment while I do our closing here.
Okay.
All right, gang, I want to thank you so much for tuning in to episode number 37 of Talking About Horses. I really appreciate you giving Wendy and I your ear for this 2 hours plus now. Please remember that if you've missed any of it, you can access the full broadcast through Facebook, YouTube, from iTunes, or by streaming directly from my website by accessing the Talking About Horses page from the Education drop-down menu. Through whatever platform you're listening, please be sure to give us a rating, a comment, a review, and a share with your friends. Your word of mouth and support is the fuel for this fire. Thanks so much, Kay.